Hey folks, it's no secret that the vast majority of PC gamers buy GPUs around or under the 200 quid mark. While it's great to look and see what can be accomplished by the highest end cards like the RTX 2080 Ti, the reality is those systems very much make up the minority when it comes to sheer volume. Looking at the Steam hardware survey, the top 3 cards listed are the GTX 1050, the GTX 1050 Ti, and the GTX 1060, and these make up 27% of the whole survey. And while 6-core CPUs are gaining a bit of traction, it's still very much quad cores that account for just under 50% of the entire user base. The resolutions used are also predominantly 1920 by 1080, and this comes in at around 65%, with 4K displays barely making a scratch at under 2% adoption, while 1440p monitors are much more popular than 4K at 6.1%. Usage ratings isn't exactly huge, although 1440p did see the biggest increase in percentage month on month. So what does this mean if you are thinking about building a new PC, perhaps your first foray into PC gaming, or you're looking to build a decent second system? Well, with game developers still having to cater for the majority, the reality is you don't need the best to be able to enjoy the latest games. So today we're going to take a look at my top 3 used GPU picks for early 2020, and at the risk of sounding a little bit too clickbaity, there's at least one in there that might surprise you. Let's start at the bottom of the barrel, in the sub 100 quid bracket, and this is a GPU I'm going to cover in much more detail in another video, simply because it's such a good buy right now. And I say sub 100 quid, but really that's not fair, as this card cost me under 60 quid. The Radeon RX 574GB, it simply represents the go-to choice at the low end. Nothing comes close to it. It really is as simple as that. A lot has been said about Nvidia's mindshare in the marketplace, and people do see them as the choice if you're a, air quotes, gamer, but the reality is this simply causes artificial inflation, especially in the used market. The top 27% of users are already using an Nvidia card at the level of a GTX 1060 or lower. And for less than 60 quid, you can get a card that not only outperforms the GTX 1050, the 1050 Ti, and the crippled GTX 1060 3GB, but in DirectX 12 and Vulkan games, the industry staple going forward, you can get a card which can kick it with the GTX 1060 6GB in many titles, and even surpass it in some others. Base models like this one I've got here come with a 6-pin PCIe power connector and a stock TDP of about 120 watts, meaning it can be integrated into even the most budget systems, and it's a capable performer at 1080p even in 2020. Now, AMD has been criticised for their Polaris refreshes in the past for being boring and only offering incremental performance increases with every revision, but in the used market this simply means that there is literally a Polaris card to suit everyone's budget. Pocket money GPU? Well, you're going to want a 4GB 570. Need a little more VRAM for some CAD or production tasks? Well, the 8GB 570 has you covered for a little bit more money. You want a little bit more gaming grunt? Well, there's the 4GB 580, which will give you a nice bump in performance for around the same price as that 8GB 570, and so on. And that kind of brings us onto the next area, which I'm going to call low £100. For less than 130 quid, you can pretty much get any RX 580 8GB you want. While for 60 quid, the Sapphire Model 570 I picked up had to make do with a lower TDP single fan design, and stock clocks, heading north of 3 figures opens you up to a bit more than just getting the best bang for your buck. Prices for the 8GB cards do tend to fluctuate a little bit more than the 4GB, and the extra VRAM buffer, it does help in newer titles with higher quality texture settings. See my recent face-off between the 4GB 5500 XT and this Aorus 8GB 580 to see what I mean, but generally anywhere between 100 and 130 quid will be able to secure you a really good RX 580 8GB. Now this is a card that still offers 1080p high gaming north of 60 FPS, even in demanding titles like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Metro and the Far Cry games. In multiplayer games like Battlefield 5 or Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the 580 also excels in making the once competitive GTX 1060 6GB look like a terrible buy. Steve over on Hardware Unboxed recently did an up-to-date mega bench and found the gap between the cards continues to widen as time goes on. And that is the reason for the 8GB 580 taking the second slot on this list. Now the next slot is a tad funny. Between the 130 and 200 quid mark can be a bit of a no man's land. Here you're going to find cards like the RX 590 8GB, a 580 on a newer fab node with higher clock speeds, which is great, but the premium on these means it's a little harder to justify the 150 to 170 quid they often go for. A good option, if you can find them, is the Turin-based GTX 1660 Non-Super, a great little card and very underrated in its own right. It's quite hard to find them on the used market sometimes since Nvidia kinda quietly killed it off with the recently released GDDR6 equipped 1660 Super, and that kinda leads to more people vying for the same auction, and that pushes prices up. If you're lucky like I was, you can pick one up for about 140 quid here in the UK, but to show how volatile the market is, when I relisted it, it had multiple bidders bidding on it and it went for over 170 quid. Sticking with the green team and looking back, the GTX 1070 occasionally crops up south of 200 quid here in the UK, and it's still a really good card, but it is getting a lot rarer for people to part with them, and as a result of that, the prices are generally starting to hold strong. At these prices though, there is one card which I would definitely recommend, and it's the one that might come as a bit of a surprise, as when I tested it new, well, I didn't really like it much at all, and that is the RTX 2060 6GB. Now over the past month or so, I've picked up two of these sub 200 quid RTX 2060s, and at this price point, the baby RTX card, it actually makes a lot of sense. The RT feature set of course is still for the most part unusable unless you're a 30 FPS masochist, absolutely nothing has changed there, but the fact it is the most popular Turin based card on the Steam hardware survey, and in fact the 5th most popular card overall, means that there's plenty of them out there. Couple that with the fact that it's the worst RTX enabled card, and many users who buy the card expecting to use its headline feature were probably a little underwhelmed, meaning that these cards tend to find themselves on eBay fairly regularly, which is great for us used parts aficionados. If you take the RTX 2060 6GB for what it should have been branded as, a great rasterized performer on a new architecture with forward-looking technologies for you to simply try out, then getting Vega 56 or 1070 Ti levels of performance for under 200 quid is a great deal. Now the card I ended up keeping was this ITX form factor 2060 from Gigabyte, and even this small card, it runs cool, keeps quiet, and that's with a single fan. In all honesty, other than the 6GB frame buffer, there's not too much to complain about at this price. On the topic of that 6GB buffer though, it is enough for 1440p, but I did bump into some VRAM limitations when creating videos and dealing with higher res, larger files in DaVinci Resolve, but for anyone wanting the best gaming GPU for a smidge under 200 quid on the used market, well, Nvidia's baby RTX takes the first spot. Just think of it more as a GTX 1660 Ti Super Jensen edition instead of an RTX, and you're going to be happy. And that's my 3 picks across the board for used GPUs under 200 quid. I've put my money where my mouth is on this one, so I would love to know if you agree with the picks, or if you think I've missed a trick somewhere. Let me know. But for now, I'll just say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comments section down below, and in the next video.